You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Sons of the Shoe is back. Nick Wilson, Spencer German, as the big voice man alluded to. And we are breaking down Ohio State's 35-16 win over Rutgers on the road, pushing them to 9-0. You guys can chat along with the show, by the way. You might see a familiar name in the comments here. So however you're watching us today, please feel free. Add in your commentary. If we see it during the show, we'll make sure to shout it out. But Spencer German, as we get started, Ohio State wins 35-16. The score's a little misleading. I'll ask you, because I've seen it on the internets, does this qualify as an unimpressive win for Ohio State?
Yeah, I think it's probably their most unimpressive win of the season, largely just because I think this was the first game where you felt like there were some maybe cracks on the defensive side of things. I mean, they give up 232 yards rushing, 5.4 yards per carry to Rutgers. They only gave up 129 yards passing, which was obviously pretty good. But it was a defense that all year we've talked about has kind of carried the workload for this team. And been, as you talk about what is their identity, I think their identity has been that stout defense, keeping them in games, giving them shorter fields, kind of when the offense needed to kick in the ass, the defense was always kind of there to do that. And they did do that today. They had the pick six, which was obviously huge from Hancock, and that certainly changed the landscape of the game at that time, especially because you had Rutgers going on that long drive. And that kind of felt like, Nick, like a tipping point. Like, if Ohio State, Rutgers was already up 9-7, are you going to let them go down the field and go up like 2 scores now and kind of put this thing where the pressure's back on you in a game that you probably should win? And so that play did kind of flip things. So the defense still did what it usually does, which is sort of set the stage, set the momentum for this game, especially when you talk about Rutgers going their first 3 series of the game were 3 and outs before they finally kind of put together a nice drive to score there and then to start the game. I think the defense did set the tone, but at the same time, you walk away seeing some of the rushing numbers against them, and it makes you realize, like, yeah, this probably wasn't their best effort, which makes it a little bit more worrisome. And I do think that on the offensive side of things, like, it was a grind, man. It took until that second half for them to kind of figure this thing out and get it together. And Travion Henderson was kind of their secret weapon, if you will, or not secret weapon, but their one weapon that was doing anything really effectively. And so, yeah, I think it is probably their most unimpressive win of the season. But as we continue to say on the show, it's the latest test and you passed it. So you keep it moving. What's Urban Meyer always say? The best thing about being 9-0 is the chance to go 10-0, and that's where the Buckeyes are at.
Andrew has shouted out to us saying, if Nick's camera has any less pixels, this would be radio. I am using an older model computer. Thank you for shouting that out. Yes. One of these days, I'll get a real computer. One of these days, just not today. As everybody knows, I'm the cheap-ass one. Got to see if Dustin will buy me one. I think
that's going to be your next ploy. You got him to buy you shoes or golf shoes, didn't you? You got to get him to buy your new laptop.
I'm getting the full pretty woman treatment out of Dustin Fox, and I'm milking this thing as long as I can. I object to using the word unimpressive. It was an unimpressive first half. It was a mistake-filled first half, including the decision to go for it on fourth and short, 4th and 5, right, on your own 30? In the second quarter. That was disastrous, and I don't understand the point of that. And listen, I also think Rutgers did a hell of a job early. But the point is, in the fourth quarter, you finally wore Rutgers down like you have every other team so far this year, and you pulled away. And I just think we've gotten to the point where if I call it an unimpressive win, I think it's not giving these kids any damn credit. And there are some things that we can get to, but like, I object to the idea that this is an impressive win because Rutgers are actually a really good team. And what we saw today was
the name of the episode, not your dad's Rutgers team.
But maybe your uncle's Rutgers team since Greg Schiano was there 10 years ago. But, like, I think that's it. I mean, you just faced a really tough, disciplined team, and you didn't buckle. If anything, you had a stroke of luck with the Hancock interception, and then from there, you took the game over. Like, you outscored them 28-7 in the second half. I think that should count as impressive, even if it wasn't the sexiest game ever.
Yeah, and I want to clarify too. When I say it's my comment specifically was it was their most unimpressive win of the season. That doesn't mean that I have to sit here and say like, yeah, they looked like garbage or whatever. Like I think they looked like the Ohio State we've come to know, Nick, this year, which is like I said, they ride sort of the coattails of the defense. It takes a while for the offense to kind of figure things out. And then they have their spots where they're able to kind of soar and take off, and they make some nice plays. And when they need it most, they count on their star athletic players like Travion Henderson, like Marvin Harrison Jr., who didn't have a huge game from a yard standpoint today, but he had the 2 touchdowns, which I think firmly keeps him in that Heisman conversation that we like to have. But yeah, like I think it was. I hate to sound like a broken record with this, but it does feel like it's kind of the same blueprint each game. And to your point, like I sort of took the jabs at Rutgers a couple shows ago.
It's all your fault. All your fault, sir.
It is. I'll take the blame on that one. But I admitted in our Tuesday show, like, yeah, that was probably unfair because this Rutgers team this year is better than past Rutgers teams. They were 6-2 coming in. Greg Schiano, as you use the word discipline, I think he does have them very disciplined, and I think that showed on the field today. So yeah, it's their most unimpressive win of the season, but it was the same style of win that they've had all year.
Every time you say unimpressive win, I do wince a little bit. They covered the spread. It was 18.5 points. They covered the spread against a really good team who, in fairness to Rutgers, we were talking about the word discipline. They had 3 penalties all day. And even though Wimsatt had the interception, by and large, they didn't have a lot of obvious what the hell are you doing plays, which for a team that with the talent level of Rutgers is really impressive. And, Monungai was fantastic today.
Yeah,
24 carries, 159 yards.
I thought the read option game sort of exposed Ohio State's defense a little bit today too. That's something they're going to have to get better at.
If I'm offering advice to Rutgers, I think they should have continued to go after Wimsatt and Monungai were unstoppable in the first half. And now, all this being said, what was most impressive to me across the entire game is the Buckeyes defense. They gave up a lot of chunk plays today, which bears out. They gave up more yardage than the Rutgers defense did, but very early in the game, you had 3 goal line stands that went from what could have been 21 points for Rutgers all the way down to 9 points. So even though Rutgers led 9-7 at the half, that was really a pivotal moment because when they needed to, even though Monungai would make a huge play here, or you just kind of have a couple big chunk plays in a row, they were able to kind of bottle up Rutgers in the red zone. So I mean, again, these are the reasons why to me, I think you can paint this picture however you want. And it just depends on what colors you want to use. I thought it was an impressive win because I thought Rutgers played a hell of a football game. And the idea that you were able to pull away late with as physical as they are, Ryan Day always talks about toughness. And there are very few teams in the Big Ten as tough as Rutgers. That's just Schiano's program. That's just what you can come to expect from him every single year. Well, even though I thought they were winning the battle physically early in the game, across 4 quarters they didn't. And so for the first half, I thought Rutgers was the more physical team. You even saw shades of that in the second half, and in the end, Ohio State they were too physical, too talented. And a lot of that starts with Travion Henderson, who I thought got bottled up more early. And then as the game went on, you just kind of saw the run blocking chipping away at that very talented, very physical Rutgers defense. And then Travion just started making plays. And that really felt like, to me, between that and the defense, the good of this game for me from Ohio State side of thing is you did bottle them up when you needed to in the red zone mostly. And then on the other side of things, Travion Henderson, this was his moment. He followed up 200 all-purpose yards last week by doing another 200 this week. And whereas last week you could point to Marvin Harrison Jr.'s performance, this week Marvin Harrison Jr., despite the 2 touchdowns, relatively quiet because of a phenomenal defensive game plan. The Rutgers corners really did a great job of taking him and Ibuka out of the game.
And to be clear too, Nick, coming into this game, Rutgers' pass defense was 4th overall in all of college football. in terms of like yards allowed per game, just based off of that metric alone. Like you knew it was going to be tougher sledding in that part of the game, which is why I was intrigued to see how they handled that. And the run game obviously came alive today with Travion Henderson back there, and that was huge, especially in the second half, as you mentioned, when Ohio State started to pull away. So, yeah, I mean, that was good to see that you kind of faced a team that was good against the pass, and they certainly bottled up Marvin Harrison Jr. quite a bit. But they responded the right way, and you kind of knew that was going to be something they had to watch out for coming into this one for sure.
And you know what's interesting is I object to saying it's an unimpressive win. I'm very curious how the College Football Selection Committee, whom ranked the Buckeyes first based off their strength of schedule or strength of record, that's the teams you played, and the two big wins against Penn State and Notre Dame. I do wonder if this game, if what other people are saying is unimpressive, yourself included, whether that impacts the Buckeyes in the polls. I don't think it should, because in the end,
well,
you won by damn near 3 touchdowns. I don't like at some point you got to give them credit for what actually the end result of it.
And like I said, that's why I think there's a difference between saying it's an unimpressive win and saying it's their most unimpressive win of the season. Like it's compared to other games, like you feel like this one they maybe should have been playing from ahead a little bit sooner or not gone into the half trailing. Like that's the kind of stuff you look at where you're like, it wasn't as impressive. But I still feel like the committee has to look and realize like this Rutgers team, again, going back to the title of the show, this is not your father's Rutgers team. Like this is a better team than previous years. They were 6-2. They have a really good run game. They have a really good pass defense. The run defense is nothing nothing to sneeze at either, because they're like 35th overall, I think, in terms of run defense coming into this game as well. So I think all around, like they're a physical team, they're a disciplined team, all those different things. I think, Nick, the bigger question in regards to what this means in the eyes of the committee has to do with what happens with the other teams that are ranked below Ohio State. We know as we're doing the show live right now, this won't sound great for the audio audience later on in the day, but as we're recording this show, Georgia and Missouri are tied at 10 late in the second quarter. We know Michigan plays Purdue on the road coming up here tonight. So there's still some things that kind of have to play out, and we have to see how those maybe impact. I think it's less about like if Ohio State wins this game, or they did win the game. So with Ohio State winning, like they've done their part. They always say just like win the game in front of you. Okay. So now I think it's about like, does Georgia blow out Missouri from here? And they they have a convincing win where it's like, okay, now they're going to jump Ohio State. Does Michigan do something that impresses you against Purdue, which I don't know that a win over Purdue really does much for you anyway.
It should do nothing for no one.
I agree. But that's more so I think what it's about. Because you're right. Like Ohio State took care of business. They covered the spread. They're 9-0. You can only ask them to beat the teams in front of them. I also think too, Nick, here's another thing. Does the committee clearly looked at resume to make Ohio State one? Did that resume take a hit today with Notre Dame losing to Clemson? And that's, I think, another part of this equation as well.
Yeah, I think it's funny, man. Like, how are we supposed to grade? And I don't know the committee ever really is truly transparent on this. Is it how impressive a win was?
Go back and forth all the time.
Is it how impressive the win was at the moment, or is it how poorly or how well a win or loss aged? Because like, I feel like if that last one's the case, man, you're going to be playing moving the goalpost every single week with just about every team in America. Like, who had the big win? Oh, Kentucky had the big win over Florida earlier this year, and now Florida's 5-4. I mean, does it take anything away from that win and how big it was at the time and how well Florida was playing until that moment? I don't know. And like, again, I don't think there's perfect answers, by the way, but I just think it's the slippery slope of all the little machinations of the playoff selection committee. That's almost why, like at the end, if they overly dissect this game, they probably will come away thinking unimpressive. But like at the same point, one, you have to give Rutgers their credit, which we've tried to balance here in this first segment. And two, it's the end result.
Yeah.
So like the whole point is all 4 quarters matter, but recency bias should matter because that's the fourth quarter more often than not tells the tape of the game unless it's a fluky game. This in no way was a fluky game. If anything, Ohio State made it closer because of some of the decisions they made or some of the lack of execution, and yet they still covered. Maybe that's the best take I can have on this. I don't think you should be allowed to be dropped in the rankings when you cover on a divisional game where the other team isn't like this isn't Purdue. Okay, this
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
this isn't a 2-win team. It's a good team, not a great team, but their style kind of naturally gives them a chance to beat you. That should be enough. Unless of course, I mean, right now I think the Georgia Missouri game is tied, and again, not great
Yeah.
for the sake of the podcast audio. But the reality is, if Georgia wins by a touchdown, oh, cool. Okay, well then you're kind of where Ohio State was versus either Penn State
Yeah.
or Notre Dame. That doesn't mean all of a sudden your resume is that much better.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, we're going to see the same thing, I think, with LSU and Alabama later today. Because if LSU beats Bama somehow, which I don't think is going to happen because their defense is terrible, but if they were to beat Bama, what does that mean for FSU? Does FSU now have one of the more impressive wins of the season with that LSU game? Like, and you're right, it changes. That's the hard thing with that being part of the equation is it changes based how the season kind of progresses, and then like how you view the team then versus how you view them now. So I don't know. Like I do think though, to your point, Nick, and that's maybe the best way to sum up this part of the conversation, is that I think it has less to do, or it should have less to do, wherever Ohio State ends up next week. It should have less to do with the result of their game, because you're right. They covered, they pulled away, they beat a good team, and they've kind of done it the same way they've done it all year. And if that was enough to be one before, it should be enough to be one now. I think it's more about what plays out now behind them with the other teams that are obviously ranked close to them. So again, we'll see what that means. We'll see what happens with Georgia, Missouri. We'll see what happens with Bama and LSU and Florida State and all these other games. But yeah, I think you got to kind of take it for what it is and realize like this isn't Rutgers from 5-6 years ago where they were terrible and people wondered why they even came to the Big Ten in the first place.
All right, guys, keep the comments rolling in. Andrew has been very, very persistent. We've got plenty of things to get to here. Of course, Ohio State gets the 35-16 win over Rutgers. But as we are a new podcast, please make sure to hit the follow button, rate, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast. And of course, make sure to like every one of our little posts here on 92 Through the Fans YouTube channel if you're following us live here. So we're going to continue on with this. We do have to get to some of the decision making by Ryan Day, but first, a message from our sponsors. All right, guys, back here, Sons of the Shoe podcast. Nick and Spencer breaking down 35-16, Ohio State over Rutgers. And I think it's now time where if you have any seldom used platitudes, which means awesome, excellent, whatever, amazing, It's time to bring him out for Travion Henderson, who followed up last week's 200 all-purpose yard performance with more today. And this one, to me, this is you won because of Travion. And I thought the offense made some mistakes early. There was some questionable play calling. We can get to all that, but just you got to really start with Travion Henderson's performance and his ability to both be physical, which I think helped them in this matchup, and the other team wore down, not him, and then just his special ability to turn like that kind of that shallow check down into a huge, I think it was a 29-yard, or I can't remember the exact yardage, but it took you right into Rutgers territory. Like that, to me, it was a vintage Travion Henderson performance today.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, Nick, we talked a lot last week just about what the identity of this team was going to be. And we asked the question flat out, point blank, like, do you have any faith that over the next 3 games leading into Michigan, that Kyle McCord can somehow ascend or take another step or become one of the quarterbacks we've kind of known in recent Ohio State history under Ryan Day? And if he can kind of become the identity of this offense, or if it's something else. And I think today proved it. Like, I think from here on out, this team against Michigan, the teams that you're going to be stacked up against, and the true like tests of who you are and what you are and whether or not you're going to be a playoff team, I think the identity of this team is the run game. And I think it's going to go as Travion Henderson goes. I think that was evidenced today. And on this, let's give some respect to Marvin Harrison Jr. Here. Like, it goes as he goes as well. But obviously part of the equation with him is Kyle McCord has to be able to get him the ball. And so I do think like how Travion Henderson, if it starts with Travion Henderson kind of getting the run game going, taking some pressure off Kyle McCord, great. And then how they're using Marvin Harrison Jr. to get him into open space, whether it's getting him on cross routes like we saw against Wisconsin a couple weeks ago or otherwise. Like, those are the ways that you're going to beat people with this offense from here on out. And I think that that's key. It's key that they know that going into that game against Michigan. It's key that they out-physical a team like Michigan. I think we saw some of that today with the offensive line against an opponent, like you mentioned, that was very physical themselves. So I think at this point, I'm willing to sit here and say, like, the identity of this team is the run game. That's what's going to kind of set the tone on the offensive side of things. And if they can get that going, specifically with Travion Henderson, then I think they actually have a shot in a game like Michigan to upset a team like that.
Yeah, it feels like run the ball a lot and then take selective shots, or not just run the ball, but use short passing game to try and generate third and shorts, which I think they did actually really well early in this game. I think McCord started 7 for 7. Actually, at one point after I think 5 drives, I think it was 11 for 13. So I'm torn because I think that works really well, but then you kind of have to balance it. It was Ibuka's first game back, so I'm not going to make a big deal of that, but then you're trying to balance it. And it's, I think at some point over the next couple of games, Kyle's got to spread the ball around to evenly between Ibuka and Marvin. Right now, it just feels like he's just looking for Marvin, right? Like he's just that's his whoopee.
And I can't blame him. I can't blame him for that. When you got the best receiver in football, but at the same time,
you can blame him for it.
Ohio State,
because it turns into turnovers or close to turnovers.
4 receivers in the country. So yeah, you're right.
So I mean, I think this is going to be the
Achilles heel
philosophy is all right. Let's run the ball and we're going to take shots. But I just, McCord continues. To me, he was tight again today, and I got to be honest with you. I don't think the play calling helped him.
I know. Okay, I know he had 3 touchdown passes, but. Well, and I guess he had completed 73% of his passes. I was going to ask if you thought this performance was worse than last week, which it's hard to say when he had 73% completions, but I don't know. I just felt like there was times in this game where he just looked like he was not there. The interception was bad. I don't know. It felt a little bit worse to me than last week, but then he ended with three touchdowns, and it's like, okay, I can't really say that about it, but I don't know.
I think the 2 late touchdown passes, actually the first touchdown pass to G. Scott was just like,
that was good.
Here.
That was
so
good,
those are really good passes. There's a chicken or the egg thing happening in my head when I watch these games. One of the things we talked about with the last game against Wisconsin was, is Ryan Day, was that a moment where Ryan Day just let him sling a little bit more just to try and see if he can open it up a little bit, right? It's Camp Randall, it's night. Can he take a couple more shots and maybe see if he builds confidence? Well, today, my Ryan Day theory was that, but that it would, if that was the case against Wisconsin, you would see that bear fruit over the next few weeks. Today, the play calling, there's one piece of play calling which does not line up with this, which makes it even more infuriating, which is the decision to fake the punt.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
On 4th and 5 at your own 30, when the whole game you've not given your quarterback a chance to really take too many shots down the field, and you've pretty much just been playing the most tight-ass game. And here's why it bugs me. I don't mind an aggressive coach. I don't mind a selectively aggressive coach. But in that moment, with that game so tight, against a team that doesn't make mistakes, against a team, quite frankly, in Rutgers that was having success with the run game, and your offense was struggling with that and maybe chunk plays, like that's so early in the game. Why does Ryan Day do it? Like, seriously, I just need to know, like, why do you do it? What's the thought process when the rest of the game, up until the Hancock interception for a touchdown, the pick six, up until then, Ryan Day had the biggest cleft asshole in that stadium. And I don't like, pardon my language, it's just the tiger got out of the cage, I'll put it back. But
good.
I just didn't
Let it out,
understand.
baby.
Like, how does it make sense that you coach so tight that it is drop back, 3-step drop, 5-step drop, quick pass, quick pass, quick pass, quick pass. You're not letting Kyle McCord do anything. And then you're giving the opposing offense premium position with that decision.
I got a sort of, I think I got an answer to that, but I also wanted to bring up with the fake punt. And I texted you about this, Nick, because I was busy with some other things, so I had the game on mute while I was watching it unfold. And so I texted you because I said, Nick, was that like a planned fake punt? Like, was that a planned thing, or was that like bad snap? He just decided, oh crap, I got to take off a run. And you flat out texted me back, and you're like, no, yeah, that was planned. That was a planned thing by Ryan Day.
That was intentional.
And I was beside myself, like, why? And I don't know. This is another one of those things. Like, I got to go back and track this. I got to go look this up, because maybe I'm wrong, Nick, but I just feel like there's so many moments throughout Ryan Day's coaching tenure where he presses and tries to go for it on 4th down, like at the wrong times, or it just feels like it's a constant thing with him. Like, he's looking for a spark for his offense, and so he just decides, all right, we're going to go for it on 4th down here, even if it doesn't really behoove his team to do so. And I don't know, like, you could always throw out the argument like, well, maybe he just trusts his defense that much. But like in that situation, I don't think that was it at all, as much as it was he was just looking for a spark for the offense, and it was probably the wrong time. Like, that was a very James Franklin decision to make, to go for it, to fake that punt at that point in the game.
Well, you know what's ironic about that?
I got to track it, but I feel like that's the case with him. I just do.
I was talking with a friend about Ryan Day, and we talked about Franklin, and we talked about, and it's funny because they're not young anymore,
right?
But it's coaches that grew up in the analytical age. And like, I don't know, Ryan Day and Greg Schiano are that removed in time, but like, Greg Schiano has a definitive persona of who he is and his team is a manifestation of that, right? You know exactly who Rutgers is going to be, whether they have talent or not. It doesn't matter. They're going to be tough. They're going to be physical, and they have an identity that's been consistent pretty much the entire time Greg Schiano has been there.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know we can say the same with Ryan. And this is less a criticism, it's more an observation. But it does feel like I think it was Ben Axelrod of Awful Announcing that said this, and so I don't want to just steal it outright. It's just Ryan Day at points has no coaching personality. There's no like, oh yes, this makes sense because this is usually when he goes for it. And if you were that concerned that this game was going to be that close, if you were that concerned about we got to make some things happen because I don't trust my quarterback, that moment just didn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't. And that's what's frustrating. If you were at their 30, okay, well, you'd be trying to kick the field goal. But if you were, no, hell, even if you were at what, the 50-yard line, maybe I could get my head around it. You're at your own 30-yard line.
Yeah,
And that's a moment where he got, let's be honest, the defense bailed Ryan Day out.
Oh yeah, I mean they held him to a field goal there. That was
Yep.
a huge swing in the game. That and the drive, that and the pick six, and we can get to the pick six a little bit more here in a second because I do have something else on Ryan Day. But the pick six, which halted a huge momentum swinging drive for Rutgers, and that stop after he went for the fake punt, I think were two of the biggest key moments in the game because it swung momentum heavily back in Ohio State's favor in two instances where Rutgers really could have like seized it for themselves.
So all right, real quick before we do this, because Ryan Day was just quoted that what appeared to be a fake punt wasn't a fake punt. So he's now saying that was not intentional.
Okay, so the question now is he just saying that, or was it actually a fake? Is he throwing his punter under the bus right now? Is that
I'm gonna need more details on why this wasn't a fake punt, why this wasn't intentional. All right, is this Andrew Berry, telling somebody don't send that fax at the trade deadline, so the Browns didn't give up a second and third for AJ McCarron slap ass?
Well, that wasn't him. That wasn't him who did that, but that was the Hugh Jackson era, wasn't it?
Oh no, you're right. That's Sashi Brown.
Yeah,
Sashi's Warriors. Yes, thank you. But no, man, I
don't want to attribute that one to Barry. That's
put it all on Sashi where it belongs. Thank you, Sashi. Praise be Sashi. But where was the miscommunication? Right? Was Ryan Day secretly thinking of, I don't know, any other quarterback? Was he like daydreaming? Like, sometimes men unhappy in their marriage will daydream about other women with their wife right next to him. Maybe he was doing that. Maybe he's thinking about Michael Pratt of Tulane and whether he'll go into the transfer portal and whether he would be better than Kyle McCord. I don't know. But
fake or not, I still think what we're sort of saying here stands about Ryan Day about not really having an identity. And I wonder, Nick, like you had a theory on Ryan Day last week. I think I maybe have one here. Like, do you think that he coaches with what's going to be said about him on his mind at all? Or not even maybe him, but just like about his team? Because the reaction he had after the Notre Dame game, which I'm not saying it's bad. I love when anybody, coach, player, general manager, the janitor who mops up the floors and hears things in the building. Like, I don't care who it is. If they give you like raw emotional reaction like that, that is what we love in sports. We don't get enough of it. Here in Cleveland, we're used to Kevin Stefanski coming out and giving this very robotic AI, Elon Musk robot answer. And it sucks. Like, we love those types of reactions. So that moment was really cool. But for him to react that way, like in that moment right after the game, and I get that it was an emotional thing, like you just won kind of like a walk-off touchdown. I get that. But at the same time, if he's hearing that stuff, if he's paying attention to it, do you wonder at all if like he's thinking about like in certain spots, well, what's going to be said about my team if this happens? Or what's going to be said about my team if we don't score here? Or if we don't run up the score on this team or whatever? Do you think that that's a thing that goes through his head?
I don't know what affects his decision-making, but do I think he feels the pressure finally after, 4 years? Do I think he's finally feeling significant pressure? Yes.
Think about it. Like, your athletic director's leaving. Generally, the athletic director that hired you is a safety net. And I kind of get like this was a different thing because it was Urban Meyer kind of tabbing his guy and passed it off to him. So it was a little bit different.
So he could go young co-eds at a bar.
What did you call it?
Irby 2 digits. Yeah.
Irby 2 digits.
Yeah, we didn't forget.
Oh,
people don't forget.
I forgot, but it's still a great line. No, like I don't know. Like there's certain elements here and there's context here as to maybe why. And think about it. Like these coaches will say like, "Oh, we block out the outside noise," but then they're the first people to tell you at their post-game press conference, like, "Yeah, hey, why'd you score an extra touchdown with a minute to go and you were already up 2 scores?" Well, we want to impress the committee. So, they're thinking about this stuff in the game of like, how do we set ourselves apart and how do we let people know we're for real?
I can't imagine where Ryan, I don't cry for me, Argentina. He gets paid an assload of money. Okay. And we should remember that. But I do empathize with Ryan because he's achieved so much and he's actually from Urban, he's raised the bar to another level, despite not winning a national title, despite not beating Michigan the last 2 years. But I think the guy that has been terse after games tells you that, yeah, he hears everything. And I think he knows. Like, I think he understands that this is a pivotal year, whether it's winning a national title and or beating Michigan, that the last 2 years feels like a step back. And listen, guys, I'm a pretty logical person. I don't think anything should happen to Ryan Day. He might frustrate me from game to game, but people that compare him to John Cooper don't clearly remember the John Cooper
No,
era,
no, no.
because Ryan Day started his career with a win against Michigan. It took John Cooper a half century. I'm slight hyperbole. Also, Ryan Day's never had anything close to a losing season. John
No.
Cooper did have a couple early struggles. So, like, it's not close. And I just think, like, but at the same point, I also understand, like, let's compare this to Michigan. Michigan is undefeated, coming off a playoff berth, has beat Ohio State twice. This is their best team with Jim Harbaugh. They have a legitimate chance to win a national title. And yet, there are boosters acting within Michigan right now to sabotage Jim Harbaugh's contract extension, Jim Stapleton, because they just don't like him. So, like, if that's happening at another undefeated team where because Jim Harbaugh likes milk with his steak or some weird crap, like, yes, I do think Ryan Day is very cognizant of the fact that he's had a lot of success, but the two ways that people measure success in Columbus, he has not done in the last 2 years. And one he hasn't done ever in winning a national title. So, yeah, I think he acutely feels the pressure. And I think here's the other thing. I think Ryan Day knows his quarterback's not good enough. And I don't mean
Yeah.
not good enough. Like, Kyle McCord is a legit starting college football quarterback. He is. He's fine. Like, you put him at Pitt, he's fine. You put him at Rutgers where he wanted to go, he's fine. But he's at Ohio State. And this is a pivotal stretch here. And if you end up losing to Michigan this year because of Kyle McCord, there's going to be a whole lot of questions open up. Namely, why didn't you go into the transfer portal like everybody else seems to do and find a quarterback that fits your system? Why did you fall back on Kyle McCord versus Williams when you probably didn't feel like either guy was, at least in spring ball, establishing himself the way you want to? So, fair or unfair, Ryan Day's smart enough to know boosters are not sane people. They're just grown up college fans. All right. They're just 18-year-old Buckeye fans that turn into 70-year-old Buckeye fans, except now they've got a shitload of power and are absolutely have nothing other to do and bitch about other than Ohio State football and live that. When it's good, it's great. When it's bad, and it's not bad now, but it's bad for him and it's bad for where Ohio State's used to being, this is where the pressure comes in. So I don't think that's why he did or did not decide to go for that fake punt or not fake punt, whatever we're calling it. But I'm telling you, this is a dude who you see in between games, there is a defensiveness to him that has grown in his time. And I think it's just he knows it's bleep or get off the pot. He might not get fired, but you added, the retirement of Gene Smith. That doesn't take effect till next June. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of business this year, it's going to be everything all in next year.
And I do think off of my theory, like I think maybe the bigger point here, what you brought up is the Kyle McCord effect. Like we heard rumors that they didn't feel like they had the best quarterbacks, and that's why it took so long to name one. I mean, he didn't name one until like the week leading up to the game, the first game of the season against Indiana. So I think maybe that is the bigger thing here. Like he might just know that, hey, our quarterback's not the same guy we've had in recent years. We're going to have to win different ways. And maybe that's why he coaches the way he does this year. But yeah, I mean, whatever the reason is, I think there's certainly some factors there that weigh on him during games, and that comes out in the way he calls plays. So,
all right, guys, we got one more segment to go. We got the Michigan Panic Meter. We've got Like It, Love It, and Leave It. As always, follow me on X or Instagram at Nick Wilson Says, Spencer at Spencito. We've got more to come. But first, a word from our sponsors. All right, it's time for the Michigan Panic Meter. For those of you new to the podcast, we've got 5 levels to the Michigan Panic Meter. Gray is the least panic, light gray is the second least panic, white is neutral, light scarlet is the second most panicked, and then scarlet is the most panicked. I came into this, Spencer, at light scarlet. What did you come in at?
I was also light scarlet. I've been pretty much light scarlet I have been in different positions of the light scarlet category from the beginning.
Always good to switch positions. Now, I will start this by
true.
asking you the question.
Baby.
Did this game give you any concern to start going from light scarlet to scarlet?
It did because I watched this one unfold with Kyle McCord and I felt like he was not playing well, and I was like, how is this guy supposed to beat Michigan? But then I feel like by the end of the game, I was sitting there salivating at the mouth over Travion Henderson and saying, okay, if this can be their identity, then maybe they actually have a shot. If they can run the football and be a more physical team than they've been the last couple of years against Michigan, then maybe they have a shot. So groundbreaking update here, Nick. I think I am going to just barely cross the border into white from white.
Oh, wait, so you're going backwards.
Yes.
So the man who thinks this is a unimpressive win is moving it backwards. No, okay, all right, your panic's neutral. I'm staying at light scarlet. This game went more or less how I thought it was going to. I kind of expected Ohio State to start slow because they have started slow. I expected the physicality of Rutgers to give them problems early in the game. I thought best case scenario for Rutgers is they would have been able to do that for 4 quarters, at which point they would have at least covered. But by and large, like Kyle Monungai is great. Wimsatt is like, honestly, I think if Gavin, I think if Wimsatt was your quarterback, I actually would be really intrigued to see him in this offense because of the dual threat ability there. Yeah. But listen, you covered, you won, and you passed the test on the road. This is a good win. It just is for me. So I'm going to stay at light scarlet. Now we get to the next part of our exam, which is like it, love it.
I might have been tainted a little bit too, Nick, by the latest developments of the Michigan cheating scandal. Like Connor Stallions is out of here, the Jim Harbaugh contract thing. Now it sounds like there might be an actual punishment coming. I don't know. Although maybe that works the opposite way and it's just a revenge tour for Michigan. But they did a revenge tour a couple years ago and that didn't work out too well.
I'm going to tell you right now, the whole Michigan sign stealing thing is a Rorschach test. If you're a Buckeye fan, you're going to see Michigan as the biggest cheaters to ever cheat, and they should get the death penalty. If you're Michigan fans, it's a witch hunt. The funny thing is, I'm still very interested in it because it's insane.
Oh, yeah.
But to the level that people are like one day people are like, I don't think anything's going to happen to them. The next day, they got their pitchfork out like, they're going to burn it down.
I also thought it was funny that the latest update there was a couple updates this week, but the latest update late in the week was that Michigan now has information that Ohio State hired a PI who uncovered all this. And it was like, okay. How does that prove your well, if they weren't looking at us cheating, then we wouldn't have gotten caught cheating. It doesn't matter who had the PI come to me.
So again, this is a report from a reporter in Michigan, but the reason why it actually matters is that according to people in Michigan, the way they would have obtained that information is illegal, which it adds intrigue. But I will go back to, I don't know what to believe anymore. I just know it's stupid, and this thing's overblown, and everybody overreacting to it plays into the NCAA, which is the worst organization in the history of organizations in sports. You kind of got to add
Does Connor Stallions ever get a job in college football again?
No, but he will get one in porn or OnlyFans. All right, love it, like it, leave it. I will start.
Always the backup play when you're out of options,
For dudes that look like that and have that name, not for Nick Wilson. I'll be working at McDonald's. Okay, if radio doesn't work out, I'm going to McDonald's. If Connor Stallions fails at football and is a bad spy, he's going to show his ding-a-ling on the internet. That's how this goes. It's, again, nobody ever said life was fair.
Somehow the show always takes a turn towards porn. I don't know how,
towards
but it always
ding-a-lings.
does.
I mean, who'd have thunk it? My love it this week was the ground battle between Monungai and Travion Henderson. 287 yards combined between those two running backs. 350 plus total yards because of Travion's 80 receiving yards today. Listen, it's great to be in the situation where we are, Spencer, where I got to see two elite running backs go head to head. And fortunately, the team that I like won, but there is nothing to be ashamed of. Kyle Monungai is a real deal. And if I was, here's the thing, it won't happen because Greg Schiano would murder them. If I was looking this year, if I was a new head coach or a head coach rebuilding a program after a good run, I would try and get Wimsett and Monungai together for their last years in college because those dudes together can ball. What is your love it?
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to go with Henderson as an option, but I was going to throw out the Hancock interception as well. I look back at that moment, man, and that was such a pivotal point in the game. You have Rutgers driving down, and it feels like momentum could be swinging, even though they already had the lead. If you don't get that interception there and the pick six to make it 14-9, it felt like it swung momentum very much back in Ohio State's favor. I don't know what this game looks like without that, especially if Rutgers goes and scores a touchdown there. So I just thought that was such a pivotal point in the game. I got to love it, man, because, again, I think it could have gone much differently if that play doesn't happen.
Well, and in fairness to what you just said, like last week against Wisconsin, there's probably 4 or 5 minutes that swung the game. This was the play. If this doesn't happen, it probably is a closer game. And I don't think there's any scenario that Ohio State actually loses the game, but it would have been a lot more uncomfortable. And I think the win would have looked a lot more ugly. My like it today. With this win, Ohio State now has 37 straight wins against unranked opponents, longest in the nation. I grew up in the Jim Tressel era, and I love Tress, so this is not a thing against him, but I'm used to the Purdue loss. The spoiler makers. I'm used to the odd Illinois loss. Even Urban, man, like Urban kind of had a stretch where it felt like he would do weird stuff against bad teams. So Ryan Day continues to beat the teams he should beat, especially the unranked teams, and he covered again. What's yours?
Yeah, it's a good stat. I was going to throw out just a third down defense. Rutgers at one point, they were 0 for 6 on third down. I think with like 6:37 to go in the third quarter or something like that. They hadn't converted one. I might have I might have had the number off slightly there, but they were 0 for whatever they were. And then they finished the game just 4-13. And Ohio State's had one of the better third down defenses in general this year. I know, kind of beating the dead horse here with how good the defense has been on certain statistical categories. But I tell you, Nick, like when I think about what a good defense is in any level of football, you used to look at like, oh, well, they give up a lot of rushing yards. That's not very good. Or they stop teams rushing. The two big ones I look at every time are third down defense and red zone defense. Are you forcing field goals and keeping teams out of the end zone? And are you getting off the field when you have a chance to get off the field? More often than not, Ohio State is getting off the field. I think that's a huge, huge thing, a huge identity and staple of this defense and this team. And if they can keep that up down the stretch here, I think it's a stat that gives you a chance against Michigan if you're good at that. It's a stat that gives you a chance against anybody if you're good at that. So I really walked away liking that a lot.
My leave it is time of possession. Rutgers outgained you time of possession. Out-timed you. I don't know. 35-15 time of possession for Rutgers. 24-24 for Ohio State. And by the way, those numbers looked really ugly about halfway through the third quarter. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it could be worse, but that was my leave it for today, Spencer.
No, I'm actually glad you brought that up because I meant to earlier. The time, but it was obvious today that Rutgers had a plan of how they were going to beat Ohio State. It was, listen, we know their offense is more limited than previous years because of their quarterback. They usually need it takes them a long, long time to kind of get things going offensively for the most part. So they knew, like, if we restrict how many possessions they actually get, and they weren't able to cash in, but if you cash in, like, that seems like the way you beat Ohio State for sure. Like, they kind of laid a blueprint here that has me a little bit nervous about teams moving forward. But my leave it in that vein of taking some time to get going offensively, just the first quarter and first half offense this year has been just absolutely diabolically bad. Ohio State is 84th in all of college football in terms of first quarter points on average. They're averaging 4.7 points in the first quarter of the season, Nick. Like, that is really bad. They're averaging 15 points, which is 45th overall in all of college football for the entire second half, or the entire first half, I should say. That is something that's going to have to change, because like it's the prime example of this team isn't really built to mount a big comeback. Yeah. Like, they cannot afford to get down early to a team like Michigan, because if they go the whole first half only scoring like one or two times, they're shit out of luck. Like, that's it. They're doomed. So they got to find a way to get that offense moving and cooking a little bit sooner in games. It's been a problem all year, and it's certainly be a problem against more superior opponents like Michigan and others.
Never forget, I'm the cursor on the show, Spencer. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun, guys. Ohio State gets a big 35-16 win over Rutgers. Again, they covered. We'll be back on Tuesday as we get you ready for the next game. We're also going to take a look ahead at all the different storylines facing the Buckeyes. And then, of course, Tuesday night, we will have the next live edition of Sons of the Shoe with the latest college football playoff rankings. Can Ohio State stay at 1? But it's been a lot of fun. Follow us at Nick Wilson Says, at Spencito_. And we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Be good.